So we're having this Farbrengen in connection to today's day, which is Chof Zayin Adar. To many people, Chof Zayin Adar is just another day on the calendar. In Chabad, the day Chof Zayin Adar, especially for those that were there at the time that things happened, it's a day that sends some messages through our minds and hearts. I want to go over a little bit the history, the background. But today, Chof Zayin Adar is the day, for those that don't know, this is the day that the Rebbe had the stroke. This is 1992, Tafshin Nun Beis. And exactly 2 years later, exactly on the same day, Chof Zayin Adar, 1994, Tafshin Nun Daled, exactly on the same day, the Rebbe had a second stroke. And that stroke, that the Rebbe did not come back to consciousness from that stroke, and that led to Gimel Tammuz. So, just to give a little introduction about the day, what it means, and how we're supposed to mark this day, what does it mean for us? As a general introduction, we find that the Rebbes of Chabad, up until the Rebbe, most of them were actually physically not so strong in their physical health. For example, the Mittler Rebbe, you might have heard quite a few stories about the Mittler Rebbe, about incidents that happened. He heard something or he saw something happened, and he fainted, and he fainted in a way that took a long time for him to recover. And the Mittler Rebbe actually lived a very short life. The Mittler Rebbe's passing was when he was 54 years old. In other words, we all know he passed away on the same day that he was born, so he lived a perfect 54, which is very young. The Maharash was also a Rebbe for a very short time. He was not so healthy and well physically, and he passed away at the age of 48. The Rebbe Rashab, when he became Rebbe, he was 22 years old. And as you heard earlier in the year, that for many years he didn't want to accept leadership. In fact, he didn't accept it until 10 years later. But most of these 10 years after his father passed away at this young age of 22, he spent a lot of time with doctors, healing. Physically, he was weak. And there were 2 times that he was so sick that the doctors said, medically speaking, they don't see that he's going to recover. One time was when the previous Rebbe was 9 years old. And when that happened, he wrote a tzava, he wrote I guess it's more than just instructions what to do after his passing. He wrote a lot that's given out as a kuntras, as a package called Chanech L'nar Al Pi Darkei. That was his will that he wrote to what the doctor said. And then he survived that. And when the Friedrich was 17 years old, he was again very sick, and the doctors also sort of gave up on his health. He traveled then to Moscow to see bigger doctors. And it was at a point that he even said to the Rebbetzin that he wants to travel to Israel, sort of finish his years in Israel, whatever time is left. And the Rebbetzin said to him, how could you do that? How could you leave the Chassidim behind? And his answer was that the previous Rebbe will take over, and he was only 17 years old at the time. After that incident, he lived again for another 23 years, but also passed away at a young age of 60. The Friedrich Rebbe, who went through the torture chambers of the Soviet Union, you see many pictures in a wheelchair, and he had different medical conditions. It was restricted, and he also passed away at a young age. He just already at an earlier age, he was in a wheelchair, but he passed away at the age of 70. The Alter Rebbe was not known to be that way. He was physically strong. Tzemach Tzedek was physically strong. And in fact, that Tzemach Tzedek lived to the age of 77. And he said that he had a bracha from the Alter Rebbe and he could have lived to 120. But because the Chassidim come to the Rebbe and they pour out their heart, and the Rebbe shares their pain and feels their pain, so he said that all the problems that he had to experience together with the Chassidim weakened him, and that's why he didn't live as long as he could have lived. However, with our Rebbe, we find that the Rebbe was physically very strong, and the things that the Rebbe did, the Rebbe's schedule is something beyond our comprehension. People that are much younger than the Rebbe, and people that do exercise all day and go to the gym and work out, probably couldn't keep up this kind of schedule that the Rebbe did. The Rebbe had yichidus, which means 3 nights a week. The Rebbe would meet with people privately. They should ask questions and gave them guidance. Usually this started about 8 o'clock at night, and it went on throughout the night, sometimes finishing 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and the Rebbe would start the schedule the next day. Except for Tishrei. Tishrei, there's so many people here that I still remember it personally. The boys in yeshiva, we start studying Chassidus 7:30 in the morning. When I came 7:30 in the morning, the Rebbe was still meeting with people from the night before. Wow. And then he went home for an hour or two, and he was back 10:30, 11 o'clock, back to his working schedule. And then he had Farbrengens. The Farbrengens, which means the Rebbe would speak for hours and hours, start at 9:30 or earlier, and sometimes go on till 3, 4 in the morning. The Rebbe would give out wine, Kershel Bracha. As you know, the Rebbe would be standing on his feet, distributing this for hours. And on top of all that, the Rebbe never went on a so-called vacation. No such thing. This was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. No break, no change of schedule. It just went along all along. I mean, we know today people who are presidents of countries, maybe for 4 years, have days that they go on vacation, weeks that they get away, they go play some golf, do other things. I mean, you're only human to keep it. And even, by the way, by the Rabbeim of Chabad, there was something in Russia they called the dacha. They went away to a place where they would be able to be a little bit secluded, more relaxed in the country area for a short time. And here, the Rebbe did not take any vacations. This was the daily schedule, very heavy schedule. So in 1977, when the Rebbe suffered the heart attack, which we spoke about in the earlier of the year, Chassidim were shocked because we did not know such a thing of a Rebbe that's not well. And nevertheless, even though it was a severe, massive heart attack, and as the Rebbe's doctor expressed himself once, and he said that I heard a lot of miracle stories that the Rebbe performed, but I think this was probably the biggest miracle from all the miracles that he performed. He was a cardiologist, the head of the cardiology department in a hospital in Chicago, and it was a miraculous recovery. And after that incident that happened in 1977, the Rebbe recovered, went back to his regular schedule, and not only back to his schedule, but he started to do things that he never did before. I remember now we're approaching Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe's birthday. So the year 1982 was the Rebbe's 80th birthday. And the Rebbe had a Farbrengen. And in the Farbrengen, it was 2, 3 in the morning, the Rebbe's doctor was there, the cardiologist. The Rebbe told him to say L'chaim. And the Rebbe told him, picked up his hand and told him to check the pulse, the doctor's pulse, because he looked very nervous about the Rebbe bringing so long. The Farbrengen ended 3 o'clock. After 3 o'clock, the Rebbe distributed tanyas to men, women, and children. Naturally, everybody who was sleeping got out of bed. We took all our children, and the Rebbe distributed tanyas till 6 in the morning. It became light outside. And that's physical labor after this massive heart attack that the Rebbe had just a few years earlier. And then the Rebbe started giving out dollars on Sunday. These are new things that never happened before. It only started after the Rebbe was 80 years old. Started a schedule of giving out dollars, standing online for hours and hours. I once heard that someone said that Rabbi Groner, who was the Rebbe's secretary, handing the dollars to the Rebbe, had to go to physical therapy because his hand going back and forth the whole day like that. The Rebbe didn't do physical therapy, giving out dollars, meeting with people, hours standing on his feet, going to the Oyhel a few times a week for hours. As we know, the Rebbe didn't eat before he went. This is a schedule like it's almost impossible to imagine anyone, even a younger person, to keep this kind of schedule. So again, when this incident happened, everybody was shocked because we know the Rebbe physically strong and physically doing things that we just couldn't imagine a young person doing it. And then it was a Monday afternoon. In fact, I remember I was at the dorm in Mrs. Gansberg's apartment. We were having a meeting, the weekly meeting we always have in the dorm. And she gets a phone call from Israel that she heard that something happened to the Rebbe. I said, nonsense. These must be people spreading rumors. It just did not register. After the meeting, I went to 770. I see everybody walking around with a tillum in their hand. Then I realized something must have happened. As what happened was the Rebbe went to the Oyhel that day. And the person who drives the Rebbe, his name is Rabbi Krinsky, so it's taking a long time. So he went to check. It's a little bit late to see if the Rebbe is ready to leave. And when he walked in, he saw the Rebbe was on the floor. And then he called Hatzalah. They brought the Rebbe to 770. And the Rebbe insisted that he's not going to the hospital. They should do all the treatments in 770, like the first time. And that was a new period called Chof Zayin Adar. So the Rebbe had a stroke. That stroke was not such a severe stroke, but 2 days later, this was Monday, and Wednesday, the Rebbe had a much more serious stroke. And as we know, so the Rebbe wasn't lifting his hand, the Rebbe wasn't speaking anymore. From that point on, there were no more sichos, no more talking. I mean, there were certain selected words that the Rebbe said to the doctors or to the secretaries, but that was a new sort of error. But happened on that day, on this day, the 27th of Adar. So there's a few things to say about this. First of all, we find by the Alter Rebbe, the year that he was arrested, from the beginning of the year, there were already signs that something is different this year and something troubling, just from the way the Alter Rebbe conducted himself. We find the same with the previous Rebbe. And this is something which you saw by the Rebbe also. That year, 1992, I mentioned this in class a few times, there were a number of things that the Rebbe said and that the Rebbe did that were extremely unusual. No one understood why, but never question a Rebbe because the Rebbe is aware of things we're not aware of. But it was definitely unusual. Just to mention one of the things was what happened in Tishrei, that the Rebbe did something which he hadn't done all these years. He wanted to stand there while every chassid was making the bracha on the esrog and the lulav, and it took 6 hours. So from 9 o'clock in the morning, the first day Yontiv, till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Rebbe did nothing but stand and watch every person make the bracha on his esrog and lulav. And after that, the Rebbe went to daven Shachris. The Rebbe's time for Shachris is 10 o'clock in the morning. This was extremely unusual. And of course, we don't know why. But then when something unusual happened a few months later, and the Rebbe had the stroke, not that we understand what the connection is, but we realize this was somehow connected to something unusual that's going to happen. Another thing is, there's a custom in all Jewish communities that Erev Yom Kippur, you distribute or you ask for honey cake. Why honey cake? Because honey is sweet. And therefore, we want to have a sweet new year. So, but we don't want to have a year that chas v'shalom, we have to ask Hashem for any kind of help. Everything should be smooth and easy. So in a sense, the meaning of this custom is that if God forbid there's anything I need to ask for, let me now ask for honey cake. So the custom is that the day before Yom Kippur, people go to their shul, to their rabbi of the shul, children go to their father or mother, and they ask her, could you give me a piece of honey cake? Once a year. That year, 1992, the Rebbe gave out honey cake, I think 4 times. One was before Yom Kippur, and then a few other times. And the last time that he gave out honey cake was on the 14th of Adar, just 2 weeks before this incident. He gave out a mimer, which is the famous mimer Ata Tetzava. It was in a plastic bag, not a plastic bag, a plastic like case for the mimer. In that was also $2 for tzedakah, and in that was also honey cake. So why would the Rebbe give out honey cake in times that it's not really distributed? Clearly something unusual is going on. And then another thing happened was that year there were 2 Adars. And the Rebbe started to speak about the fact that it says, Meshenichnas Adar, Marbim B'Simcha. When Adar comes, you're supposed to increase joy. But this year is something unique. We have 60 days of joy because it's 2 Adars. 2 times 30 is 60. And what does that mean? If you've learned this in classes, you might be familiar with a term related to kashrus. It's called bittul b'shishim. Bittul b'shishim means that if you have something that's not kosher, and it falls into something which is kosher, and that something is 60 times more. By the way, don't give any halachic rulings on what I'm saying to you, because there are many conditions when, where this applies. So don't do anything. But there's a principle that in certain circumstances, let's say you have soup and something that's not kosher fell in, and the thing that's kosher is 60 times bigger than this drop or 2 drops, then it becomes bottle, which means it's canceled out, because the bigger one sort of cancels it out. So the Rebbe said, if you have 60 days of joy, that will be canceling out all the negative things that could possibly be. And he repeated this over and over. And as a result of that, that's when they began, someone suggested, and asked the Rebbe, would it be okay if that's the case, that we're supposed to increase in joy, to have singing and dancing in 770 at night with music? And the Rebbe said it was a good idea, and they started to do that. All this was unusual. And then this happened, which was Chof Zayin Adar. One more thing I'd like to add, and one more thing, you have to add one more thing, and one more thing after that. And that is, this was almost, I would say, more open than anything else. A few weeks before Chof Zayin Adar, there was a day, it was the 3rd day of Shvat. The Rebbe went to the Ohel. It's not a day that he usually goes to the Ohel. Came back, and he says that he wants to speak. And what the Rebbe spoke in that Sikha, one part of it was also very unusual. He spoke about the previous Rebbe and how the previous Rebbe in the later years had difficulty with his speech because of whatever condition that he had. The Rebbe explained it in a spiritual way, that it's similar to what we find with Moshe Rabbeinu. He came to take the Jews out of Egypt, and he was kvad peh v'kvad loshen, which means he had difficulty with his speech. And the Rebbe connected the 2 things, that it's part of the process of redemption. But nevertheless, he spoke about the previous Rebbe, difficult with speech, how much he suffered from it, and how much it got in the way of what he wanted to do, to speak to Hasidim, give over words of Hasidus, spread Hasidus. It limited his activities. That's very unusual. Whoever knows anything about the Rebbe, whoever knows anything about the Rebbe's sichos and the Rebbe's way, the Rebbe never focuses on negativity, on suffering, on pain. It's not the Rebbe's way. And here the Rebbe spoke about it. And then he concluded, so what could we do about the fact that the Fried Rebbe had this difficulty with speech? And we're thinking, what could we do? This is 42 years later. The Fried Rebbe passed 42 years earlier. The Rebbe never asked this question, what could we do to help out the situation that the Fried Rebbe has difficulty with speech? And then the Rebbe went on to say what we can do, which I'll soon explain. But it was very puzzling. So a few weeks later, when the Rebbe stopped speaking, we all understood the Rebbe wasn't just talking about what happened by the previous Rebbe, but the Rebbe was preparing us that there's going to soon come a moment that the Rebbe will stop speaking, and what could we do to compensate for that the Rebbe won't be speaking and saying what he wants to say. One more thing, this is it, between all the one more things, is that exactly 11 months earlier, on the same day, the 27th of Nisan, same day of the month, it was the 27th, 28th day of Nisan at night. The Rebbe came back from the Ohel, also surprised, began to speak. And in that talk, he said words that sent shockwaves throughout the whole Hasidic community in the world. And the Rebbe said, I did everything I can. I tried everything I can to make everybody do whatever they can to bring Mashiach. And apparently just didn't happen. So, right, giving this over to you. Do everything you can. From now on, you do what you can. The Sikha was very, very painful to listen to. As if it sounded as if the Rebbe is saying, I did everything I can. It didn't help. I'm giving up, giving it over to you. It's not what he was saying. And we'll probably have classes explaining that also. But what he did say was, I'm now giving it over to all the Hasidim. I did what I can. Exactly 11 months from the day, that's when the Rebbe stopped speaking. And in a sense, it was almost exactly what the Rebbe said. Now I'm giving it over to you. I'm not speaking anymore. You have to do all this in order to bring Mashiach. So what does the Rebbe say? What could we do about it? What does it mean? What could we do? And the Rebbe's answer was, what did Hashem tell Moshe Rabbeinu? When he told Hashem, I have a speech impediment, I can't speak clearly. How can I go to Paro? Hashem said to Moshe, first of all, Hashem said, I will help you speak. I'm the one who created humans and speech. Of course, I can take care of that. But he also said, Aaron achicha yeh neviyecha. Aaron, your brother, will be your spokesman, which means Aaron, who had no issue with speech, he was healthy in that sense. So Aaron will speak for you. And the Rebbe concluded, being that the Rebbe is no longer saying the things that he wants to say, so we should be like Aaron, and we should make an effort to speak and give over the teachings of the Rebbe, the directives of the Rebbe, all those things that the Rebbe has a passion for and wants to say them and always said them. Now we should be the ones saying it, and that'll sort of make up for it. And that's basically what we took away from that particular sikha. Now, how do you react to such a day, and how did the Hasidim react to such a day? The first question was, the Hasidim began to do what the Rebbe said, to dance and sing at night because it's Chodesh Adar. Suddenly the Rebbe has a stroke, and the Rebbe is in this condition. So right away, there were two opinions. Surprise, two opinions. One opinion said, stop all the dancing and stop all the singing. How dare you sing and dance when the Rebbe is in this condition? The other opinion said just the opposite. The Rebbe is in this condition, you have to dance stronger and sing stronger. How does that make sense? Because that is the Rebbe's own personal advice to everybody and anybody in any situation. The Rebbe would always say not to be down, not to despair, to have emunah, to have bitachon, and to thank Hashem, and to sing and dance even before the miracle happens. And if you show Hashem that you have the confidence and you're singing and dancing, and simcha breaks all barriers, and ultimately that'll bring Hashem's bracha. The Rebbe would often say to learn from the women in Mitzrayim that they were singing to Hashem and preparing even before they left Egypt, because they were so confident that we're going out of Egypt and Hashem is going to perform incredible miracles. So these were the two schools of thought. What do you do? He asked the Rebbe himself what to do. So a group of people wrote into the Rebbe and asked. The Rebbe would answer by nodding his head yes or no in those days. And they told the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said yes, to continue with the singing like before. In fact, one of the doctors involved was Dr. Rosen, who's a doctor in the community here. Of course, they had cardiologists and neurologists because it's a different condition, but he was also involved as a local doctor. And he said, even though the Rebbe wasn't speaking, there were certain words which we heard very clearly the Rebbe say and pronounce. And one of them, and he said it quite often, was Shira v'Zimra. Shira v'Zimra means to sing, and Zimra is also sing. The difference is Shira is singing with your mouth, and Zimra is with musical instruments. In other words, the Rebbe himself was personally encouraging. In other words, singing and dancing doesn't mean that I don't care, chas v'shalom. It doesn't mean it doesn't bother me. On the contrary, the natural reaction of Rabbi Chassid will be to be crying and davening and saying Tillim and being broken. But the Rebbe would never allow that, and he certainly didn't allow that with his own situation. And the way to get above it, the way to move forward is through having bitachon and singing and dancing and trusting in Hashem. That's in general. So that became the approach at that time. But there's also another thing that the Rebbe, which we know in those years, what was the Rebbe saying over and over and over and over is that we're living in the times of Mashiach, and the miracles we see that are happening to the Jewish people in Israel, the Jewish people in Russia, that miraculously Russia opened their doors and the communist regime became non-existent, miracles that no one ever expected. These are all miracles and part of the processes that are leading up to Mashiach. And Mashiach's coming is imminent. So with all these amazing words and all these amazing promises, how did it make sense that in the process of all this, the Rebbe has a stroke and the Rebbe becomes sick and the Rebbe can't speak anymore? But we are used to that we have times with tzaddikim or prophets openly say this and this is going to happen. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen. It looks like the opposite is going to happen. And that's where we need to be strong in our faith, that we accept that what Torah says is true, what a Navi says is true. And even though our eyes seem to be something different, it's not going to weaken my amunah. We don't have to look very far. But just a few days ago, today is Thursday, a week ago, it was Shabbos, and we read a parsha in the Torah that's called Kisisa. And in that parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people, don't worry, I'll be back in 40 days. And they counted 1, 2, 3. They came to 40, he wasn't back. And they said, well, he's not back. Looks like his words are not going to be fulfilled. And what do? They made a golden calf. And what did that do? Unfortunately, it brought a lot of grief to the Jewish people for the whole future. Then there was another group, Shevet Levi. They didn't give up. They had Amunah. They had no part in making this golden calf. And many other stories that are similar to this. In fact, there's another story related to the Mishkan. You probably know, it must have been talked about in class, this Sunday will be Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the day that Moshe Rabbeinu built the Mishkan for the first time. The sanctuary in the desert. This is going to be anniversary. What year is it going to be? 3,300 and something and change. What? 33? Oh, wow. Oh, really? 333? 4 threes. That's amazing. Okay. That's easy to remember. 3,333 years since the Mishkan was built. Amazing. There's a pasuk in Eishes Chayil, you say it every Friday night, and it says, and they laughed till the last day. What does that mean? There's a medrash that says when Moshe told the Jews, build a Mishkan and Hashem's presence will be there, there were people who were laughing and ridiculing his words. They said, that's insane. How could you believe such a thing, that Hashem's presence is going to come down in a small little building? It's inconceivable. Moshe said, that's the truth. Start building. They built it. We all know when did they finish building it? On the 25th day of Kislev, which is the day of Hanukkah. And now they're going to be proven wrong. But guess what Moshe Rabbeinu said? Don't set it up. It's all built, but don't set it up. And these people who are making fun, they said, you see, it's not going to happen. I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. Look, it's all finished. Why doesn't he set it up? Because it can't happen. And then the month of Kislev passes, the month of Teves, the month of Shvat, Adar. Finally, on the 23rd of Adar, Moshe says, okay, now we're setting it up. And all the people who are making fun are like, oh, he's going to prove us wrong. And the people who are supporting Moshe said, right, now we're going to see how Moshe is true. At the end of the day, what did Moshe say to do? Take it apart. They built it, take it apart. And of course they said, you see, I told you it's never going to happen. The next day they build it again. At the end of the day, take it apart. The next day they build it again. This happened for 7 days. On the 8th day, finally it was built. So these laughers, these scoffers, they were laughing till the last day. And the last day, unfortunately, they were the ones that were laughed at, because what Moshe said was emes. So basically, today's day is a day that we have to strengthen ourselves in Amunah, that in spite of what we saw, in spite of what happened, and in spite of the fact that we don't have the Rebbe here physically and see him physically with our eyes, first of all, we have to follow the Rebbe's directive to continue saying verbally the things he told us, which is the teachings of Torah, the teachings of Chassidus, the directives, and especially publicizing to the world that they should be strong in their Amunah in Mashiach. And it's not a day to be sad. It's not a day to be brokenhearted. If a person starts crying, you can't help it. It's a failing. Those people who knew the Rebbe personally and felt that connection. But we don't make the effort to get myself to cry on this day. And in fact, if you'll see people dancing and singing, this is the basis, because the Rebbe's way how to overcome challenges, difficulties, and things of this nature is dafka through simcha, expressing our hope that very soon Hashem will take us out of Golus. We'll see the fulfillment of those words that the Rebbe told us and promised us that is going to happen. And actually, once that happens, we'll see the Rebbe again. We'll see all the people that we miss and that we love will be back again here, Begashmias, and we'll all go out of Golus. In fact, there was a very strange sikha that the Rebbe gave 2 years earlier, exactly on the same day, the 27th of Adar, 1990, and the sikha begins, this day is especially connected to Mashiach and Geula. Now, when you look at the sikha, there's no explanation. What's the connection to Mashiach and Geula? But the Rebbe says those words. So Hasidim feel that it's related to what happened, that even though this is outwardly and to our eyes something negative, but it's part of the process, just like in Mitzrayim, before they went out of Egypt, what happened? Before they went out of Egypt, things became terrible, so much worse that the Jews were complaining to Moshe. And before they built the second temple, what happened? Haman came out with a decree to kill all the Jews, the worst decree in history, right before they built the second temple. So we see that sometimes this is part of the process, and that's what we believe is here. So today, first of all, to strengthen our emunah, today to give extra tzedakah, specifically to learn something that's connected to the Rebbe, and to it's still part of the Simcha month, to increase in Simcha even more, and we should be zeicha to see the fulfillment of Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the building of the Mishkan, and we should see on Chof Zayin Adar the building of the third Beis Hamikdash. Should be today and should be now.